Duke obliterated Mount St. Mary's behind a perfectly healthy and now well-rested Cooper Flagg. And folks, that is bad news for the 31 teams remaining in the tournament field.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday evening, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Live Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts here every single day. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade, and we're coming at you talking NCAA tournament stuff. We're talking reactions from Friday's game, the full look at the 32 teams still remaining in the NCAA tournament field. We got some other fun stuff to get to, some game previews as well. Want to thank all of you for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Remind you all to listen to the show ad-free on Amazon Music if you haven't checked that out yet. And give a special shout out to all of you everyday listeners, those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. And if you need one now, you can grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, Isaac, tons of stuff to get to. This was the first two rounds here. The first round, not particularly exciting in the sense that we didn't get a ton of buzzer beaters. We didn't get a ton of huge upsets. In fact, I think this is the first time since 2017 we have not had any team seeded 13 or lower advance to the round of 32. We've really just kind of seen a fairly chalky bracket. We've seen a few close calls. You know, we saw UC San Diego nearly take down Michigan. We saw Bryant hang with Michigan State. We've seen a few other games where it's like, oh, maybe, but nothing really ever materialized. And now we're sitting with a field of 32 teams left. Half of them are in the SEC and the Big Ten. Like that's what we're kind of dealing with right now. But we're going to get to what that means, what I'm excited about with that. While it means that we didn't get as many fun stories like Oakland and some of those other teams, we had some really incredible matchups on Saturday and Sunday. We were looking through these games, and there's not a bad matchup out there. I'm really excited to see how some of those games are going to shake out. But before we get to all that, we got to talk about the Duke of it all, because Cooper Flagg not only played in Duke's first round game against 16 seed Mount St. Mary's, which, by the way, Duke won by 150 points, something like that. 93-49 was the final score. Jon Scheyer said that Cooper Flagg is not going to be limited in any way. And if you look at the box score and you see, well, Cooper only played 22 minutes, clearly he was limited. No, that was just a game plan. They didn't need to play him any more than that because of the aforementioned score, where they just didn't need. I mean, I think Tyrese Proctor led the team in minutes and he played 24. So this was, in my opinion, Isaac, a best case scenario for Duke. What did you think about this game and the fact that we got Cooper here healthy and ready to roll for the rest of this tournament?
Man, I love that it was essentially just like an inter-squad scrimmage for Duke. You know, like it was almost like, I don't know, there's probably some like Durham Community College or something around there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's like, man, can you guys just come in and play with us for like it? Mm-hmm. It kind of had those vibes. Like Cooper only played 22 minutes in this game, but it wasn't like he was on a pitch restriction or a limits restriction. It was just like, Nobody for Duke played, like Tyrese Proctor played the most for Duke at 24 minutes. And so really was a great opportunity to just get in there. Look, we said all week, Andy, let's just make sure we mention this. We're like, Duke has no reason they should play Cooper Flagg in this game unless, right, we'd always caveat it with, like, he's just fine.
Yep.
And they've worked on it for all of these, I guess, 8 days, and it's in great shape. So it's like, fine, roll him out there. Let's test it. Let him get a little bit confident. You know how like coming off an injury and it's like, you don't feel confident in your limb. You'd rather do that against Mount St. Mary's than you would against Baylor on Sunday. And so in that regard, it makes a ton of sense to me, Andy. And I love that Jon Scheyer was just very honest with it. You know, sometimes we get cagey coaches. I love that pregame. He was just like, yeah, he's not going to be limited in any way at all. And here we're going to go. So, I love that side, and Duke just had their way. So easy peasy.
Yeah, 14 points for Cooper in this game. He had 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks. So it's not like he was unproductive or just kind of listless. He went out and dominated. He had a great game for the amount of minutes that he played. Again, Mount St. Mary's not a particularly great team, but you still like to see your freshman who's coming off of that kind of injury come in and have a great game. So I'm very interested to see how much he plays and what he looks like on a relatively short rest against Baylor. And that kind of leads into the second part of this conversation, Isaac, which is all 4 of our 1 seeds, of course, advanced. In fact, all of our top 4 seeded teams advanced, which is the first time since 2017 that has happened. It's a pretty rarity, but this group of teams that our 1 seeds are playing on Saturday and Sunday is absolutely insane. If I told you that the 1 seeds, obviously, if you follow this season, you know, and I say Houston, Auburn, Florida, Duke are your 1 seed, you're like, yeah, of course. But in many of the last few seasons, if I told you the 1 seeds were Creighton, Gonzaga, UConn, and Baylor, you would believe me, because those teams have been 1 seeds or very close to it. I don't think Creighton has, but they've all been in the conversation as top 3 seeds. Those are all 8 and 9 seeds. That is complete insanity. Auburn lines up against Creighton on Saturday. Houston lines up against Gonzaga on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we have Florida taking on UConn and Duke taking on Baylor. All of those sound like Sweet 16 or even Elite 8 matchups, and yet they're all happening in the round of 32. We kind of knew all along that some of these teams like Gonzaga and UConn were kind of competing in those 8-9 lines just because their resumes didn't end up being what they thought they were going to be. But I don't think any of these number 1 seed teams are feeling particularly comfortable looking at the teams, the rosters, and the coaches that they have to go up against in the round of 32.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, you know, and tying our first conversation in with this, with Cooper Flagg being good to go, I feel great about Duke, right? We had been saying like Houston and Florida are the 2 hottest of the 1 seeds right now. But my hopes in Duke's capability as a national title favorite, seeing what we saw today, or now yesterday for the East Coast and Central Coasters, which include me, Central Coast, that's not a real thing. Central Time is a real thing. You can't have coasts, Andy, in the middle of the country. I don't know if you're aware of that. That's how geography works. It's like Buster Bluth in Arrested Development, where he's like, I'm a cartographer. The blue is clearly the land. Oh, man. Anyway, Andy, like this gives me hope that Duke is in great shape. I think they have the easiest time against Baylor, although I'm super excited for them and Jeremy Roach to be reunited, as you know, the college basketball gods always give us little goodies like that. So that'll be great. But dude, these matchups are incredible. I mean, I stare at my eyes are glazing over staring at them in our show notes.
Let me ask you this. Okay. The FanDuel lines have come out for these 4 games. And again, all 4, the 1 seeds are favored in all 4 of these games. That's not a surprise. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. In fact, we'll get to this later in the show, but of the games coming up on Saturday and Sunday, there's only one time where a lower seeded team is favored to win that game. That's just how it typically goes. You end up usually seeing 1 or 2 of those per weekend. But all of these are relatively close lines, at least compared to your typical 1 seed versus 8-9 seed conversation. Which of these 4 games, and I'll give you the matchups again, do you think has the lowest line in terms of their projected closest potential matchup? Again, you have Auburn versus Creighton, you have Houston versus Gonzaga, you have Florida versus UConn, and then you have Duke versus Baylor. Which of those do you think is the closest line, and maybe which one do you think is the best line or most favorable line for the 1 seed?
I think Duke Baylor is probably the widest gap.
Yeah, you would be correct about that. That is an 11.5 point spread. That is the widest gap. 2 of them are tied, and then there's one that is the best odds for the lower seeded team.
Okay, I think Florida UConn is one of the 2 that's in the middle there. I don't think that's the closest line, and then so it's either Auburn Creighton or Houston Gonzaga. I the only reason I would think Auburn Auburn Creighton is just because of what it's not so much about Creighton, but just because of Auburn lately. But I think I'm going to go Houston Gonzaga, even though I think Houston is in a better spot right now than Auburn. I just think it's the Gonzaga of it. So I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, you'd be correct that is the one. Like we said, Duke Baylor is 11.5 point line. Florida, UConn, and Auburn Creighton are both 9.5 point spreads in favor of the 1 seed. And then Houston is only 5.5 point favorites over Gonzaga, which is pretty small line there. I'm really fascinated by this game for tons of reasons. I think the most notable is just the fact that these 2 teams play completely different styles. of basketball. And Gonzaga's played St. Mary's a lot, and St. Mary's plays that super slow, methodical, physical pace style that Houston does, whereas Houston has just played BYU and Arizona in the Big 12, who play more similarly to Gonzaga. So I think these teams are going to be kind of comfortable squaring off against these different opponents, but man, it's going to be a really fun matchup. I was a little surprised at how short that line was, but Houston, they blow out bad teams, but they are comfortable winning closer games against good teams. So I think there's a real chance this ends up being a close game.
I feel like Creighton could beat Auburn.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
And then I think I know the Duke Baylor line is the biggest of these four. Mm-hmm. I think Duke is going to annihilate Baylor. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it will be 20 plus. I think this line is way too small. Yeah. I'm not a betting person. I offer betting advice here because that's what we do. And like, if I were a betting man, I would take Duke easy against the spread in this thing and not think twice about it.
Yeah, I think Creighton absolutely could win head-to-head here against Auburn. Again, the front court is what interests me. Creighton's depth concerns me. Jamia Neal just had an amazing game in the first round against Louisville, which I think helps kind of inspire a little bit more confidence. But yeah, the Pop Isaacs injury kind of forever stunted this team's ability to reach their ceiling. But hey, Greg McDermott will be quite happy with the Sweet 16 appearance and a win over a 1 seed. So if they can get that one on Saturday, one of the late tips or afternoon tips on Saturday, it should be a really fun one.
I think Ryan Kalkbrenner could probably touch the ceiling. Andy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sam. All right, Andy, both the Big Ten and the SEC had eight, count them, different teams advanced to the round of 32. But the Big Ten didn't have any losses, while the SEC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, Andy. That's what happens when you get 87 teams into this dance. What on earth is going on? We're going to break that down and talk about some of the rest of Friday's action coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about our good friends at Nissan, we are all about the stats here at Locked On. You guys, if you follow and know me, I am a stats nerd. I am a stats junkie. I dive in and I can rarely find my way back out because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers, they're on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. So whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Check it all out and learn more at nissanusa.com. Andy, we had a crazy experience here with the Big Ten doing something that's literally never been done before. 8 Big Ten teams get into the tournament. Literally all 8 of them win in the first round. It's the most wins by a conference undefeated, whatever. All of that, put that all together, and you know what I mean. Purdue, Wisconsin, UCLA, Michigan, Maryland, Illinois, Michigan State, and Oregon. They're all there. It's all crazy. Also, alphabetically, that's nuts, Andy. The earliest alphabetized of these teams is an I, Illinois. Got a whole bunch of M's and dubs and stuff in there. Anyway, really good stuff from the Big Ten here. The SEC, obviously, with their 14 teams, but then Texas losing, obviously, in the play, and they have 13 in the main field. They go 8-5 in round 1, matching that number, but obviously 5 teams go by the wayside here, Andy. Really interesting performance. And that means, Andy, I don't know how good at math you are. But there are 32 teams left. And when you have 8 from the SEC and 8 from the Big Ten, that means literally half of the second round is an SEC or a Big Ten school.
Yeah, absolutely crazy how much these conferences dominated. But really, like, how much the Big Ten dominated? I think that, the storyline is the Big Ten. Like, 8-5 from the SEC is not bad. And honestly, like, the SEC, I think their top 4 seeded teams or top 5 seeded teams went 7-1. Like, basically the SEC won all the games they were expected to win. And then their lower seeded teams didn't fare as well. Obviously we had, 10 seeded Vanderbilt loses to St. Mary's, a 9 seeded Georgia loses to 8 seeded Gonzaga. Like, the lower seeded teams did not do as well, but the higher seeded teams in the SEC did great. But the Big Ten, they didn't really have any lower seeded teams. That was a conversation we had kind of coming in to this tournament was, that the Big Ten, all of their teams were seated between a 2 and a 7. They were really kind of all concentrated in that 4, 5, 6 range. And they came out and dominated. And not just like 8-0 is a dominant performance, but most of these games weren't even close. Michigan played a close second half against UC San Diego. Valiant effort by the Tritons to come back in that game. But really outside of that, I thought Wisconsin looked a little listless at times in their first game. So did Purdue. But the margin of victory for these teams was huge. UCLA crushed Utah State. Maryland crushed Grand Canyon. Like these teams went out, and Michigan State and Oregon were the last 2 games. Just finished up a few hours ago as we're recording this. And I mean, Oregon was up like 20-4, I think, at one point against Liberty. Like this thing wasn't even. Michigan State let Bryant hang around for a little too long before they just cruised past them in the second half. But really, really tremendous stuff. And actually, as we're recording this, I just saw a post from Ken Palm saying that this is the average margin of victory in this entire tournament for the first round games was the highest ever, highest since 1997, at least going back to his data. The average margin for the entire round was 16.7 points. So that kind of goes back to the point we were making. Not a lot of buzzer beaters, not a lot of close games, but when looking at what the Big Ten did in particular, they just went out and smoked their opponents and really set themselves up to kind of change the narrative that has been so dominant towards the SEC this year and kind of say, hey, look at us, because we got a lot of good teams in the tournament and they're all still here. Every single one of them is still here.
Andy, we go to the Big 12 next, where only one team lost in the first round. The Big 12 goes 6-1. BYU, Houston, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Baylor, and Arizona all win. That brand new Arizona being in the Big 12 is still, it's been a whole year and I'm still wrapping my head around it. But Andy, there's one team in that list of winners I did not mention that is perennially in that list of Big 12 winners. And that's Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks, who, it's expected. Given how this year has gone, it's not that shocking. If we zoom out and look at college basketball history, wildly shocking. But looking at this year, it's like, well, yeah, of course they lost. It's wild that makes sense.
Yeah, preseason number 1 team falling early in the tournament, not winning a game. Just a really bummer season for Bill Self and the Jayhawks. Sad that they kind of stand alone among Big 12 teams that don't advance. I'm sure that's just making Bill Self a little bit extra prickly, kind of knowing that happened for this team when the rest of this conference advanced. When even Baylor, who had a rough year, they advanced in their first round game over an SEC team, which Kansas was unable to do. They couldn't beat Arkansas. Baylor gets that W over Mississippi State. But yeah, I think Kansas they're gonna have to kind of tear this thing down to the studs and figure out how to start over, because this era, these last few years, did not go well for this conference. And I'm curious to see what they will do. And I'm kind of curious quickly. I know we're going to talk about the ACC in a second here, but the Big East was odd to me too, because Xavier went 1-1. They won their play-in game and then lost, so they don't really count. But UConn, St. John's, Creighton, they all get W's. But Marquette takes a loss. And I think, all year long, the conversation around Marquette, Shaka Smart's team, not a lot of rebounding. They got beat by New Mexico. Like this New Mexico team went out, Donovan Dent, great game. Nelly Jr. Joseph dominated down on the block.
It's almost like we said it was going to happen, Andy.
Yes, it's exactly what we said was going to happen. David Joplin had a great game for Marquette offensively. He was really good. But yeah, I think that Marquette's another team that they got to kind of figure out what they want to be and what they want to do, because again, they kind of stand out because the other Big East teams all won the games that they were expected to win. But Marquette, I'm curious what they'll do, because they didn't add any transfers. That was not the thing that Shaka Smart wanted to do. And I'm like, I wonder if they're going to change that tune after this year.
Purdue being the other Power 5 conference school that didn't bring in any transfers. Andy, it was interesting. I've been thinking about this as we've been recording. Yesterday, the ACC obviously lost both Louisville and Clemson. Clemson down massively to McNeese and then goes on this crazy torrid comeback that falls just short. Well, not quite just short. We had the, it fell. Well, no, it did. They lost by 2.
Yeah, they lost by 2.
I'm conflating the Louisville and Clemson games in my head. I was about to say, and then Brad Brownell gets this dumb tee, and I was like, no, that was Pat Kelsey. But today, on Friday, Andy, Carolina basically followed that same script of Clemson on Thursday, where Carolina is down 22 early to Ole Miss. They have a furious comeback, get it down to 2 with 52 seconds left. And Sean Padula, the former ACC player himself, hits a wing 3 to basically end things and end RJ Davis's long tenured career at North Carolina. And now, consequently, we only have one ACC school left. Now it's a school that could win the whole blessed thing, Andy, for crying out loud. But Carolina, Clemson, and Louisville all bow out in the first round.
Yeah, rough go for the ACC, a conference that, last year kind of quieted a lot of the doubters with a deep run from NC State and a deep run from Clemson and a solid run from Duke. And this year, very much unable to quiet those doubters. Clemson and North Carolina, like you said, did everything they could to try to get back into those games. If those ball had bounced a little differently for both of them towards the end, we might be having a very different conversation here. But at the end of the day, those two teams just got too far down early in that game and weren't able to come back. Isaac, we mentioned the New Mexico win over Marquette, and we mentioned that kind of from the Marquette side of things. But what it meant for the New Mexico and for the Mountain West was it came after Colorado State's win over Memphis, which was one of the very few games that was an upset that was actually predicted. Most of the betting lines had Colorado State favored. They beat Memphis. Nick Clifford looked awesome. Evans I think he had 6 threes for them as well. But what it meant is that the narrative around the Mountain West, which was San Diego State got smoked by North Carolina, and then Utah State got smoked by UCLA. And it's like, oh, look, the Mountain West is going to Mountain West again. Why did we even consider Boise State? Like, this team should never get this many bids, blah, 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 blah. And then they go out and get 2 really quality wins, both upset wins, 12 seed over a 5, 10 over a 7, 2 teams that were in the top 25 pretty regularly this year that got beat. And now the narrative's flipped a little bit. And I was really impressed by what both these teams were able to do to kind of quiet those doubters and potentially make a push for a Sweet 16 as well.
And Andy, I think it's a moment to look. We apologize when we need to apologize. We toot when we need to toot. And we were in on both of these games, right? Like Andy was just talking about, like Nelly Jr. Joseph dominates in the paint. We basically called that game script, folks. And so we're not going to always get them right. But if you're here listening and hanging out with us, you're going to hear a lot of this stuff. We've been talking about Colorado State, how hot they've been, this crazy run that they've been on, and the Nick Clifford of it all. And I love that today, Andy, you and I were talking about before we recorded, Nick Clifford had a very strong game, made a lot of winning plays. Didn't necessarily, like, if you're just a box score looky-loo, you might look at that and be like, well, Nick Clifford didn't do a ton. That he absolutely did a ton to help influence this game. But it was nice that it didn't have to be him that helps Colorado State get this win over Memphis. Really, really good stuff. And the Mountain West now sending 2 teams into the round of 32, Andy. Pretty cool stuff. Andy, as we get ready to wrap this segment, look, the Big Ten wasn't the only undefeated conference in round 1. The West Coast Conference. We had a St. Mary's winner on Friday, and we had a Gonzaga winner on Thursday. How about it for another undefeated conference, Andy? Both of these teams beat what conference were the teams they beat from?
Right. So they both beat SEC teams, which I think means that we probably should have gotten like a 5-bid WCC, right? Look, respect to San Francisco and Santa Clara. Those teams could actually legitimately probably contend in the NCAA tournament. But yes, it is fun to see the WCC be the only other team with bit conference with multiple teams in the round of 32 that did not have any losses. Just a fun story. We'll see St. Mary's takes on Alabama. So a chance for the WCC to potentially go 3-0 against the SEC. While we talked earlier, Gonzaga, of course, taking on Houston, a chance to continue their Sweet 16 streak, make it up to 10 years if they are able to beat the Cougs. Really excited to see how the WCC teams shake out this weekend as well. Isaac, we kind of already touched on it. We've touched on it quite a bit already. The good news about there not being a ton of big-time upsets is that when you look at the slate of games, and we talked about Saturday's slate late on Thursday's show, so if you missed that, you can check it out there. But we're going to talk about Sunday's slate, and my goodness, we have just incredible basketball games still to be played in the NCAA tournament on Sunday. We're going to preview those games, talk about our favorites, all that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, daylight saving time, we're just watching the NCAA tournament. If you're like us, I'm feeling that lost hour of sleep and 5-hour energy. It has our back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you just need a little boost to power through the day. And again, if you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament or watching Locked On College Basketball, squeezing in an extra round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-hour energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. We've been staying up late every single night, pretty much in the month of March. And I tell you what, that 5-hour energy is the jolt that I need to help me keep going the next day. Whether I'm at a game, whether I'm traveling to a game, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and it helps keep me feeling refreshed. So head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. And if you need one now, grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. The NCAA Tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA Tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, Isaac. Incredible matchups
Andy,
coming our way.
Stop talking. Your face at the end of that promo is so hilarious to me. Every time I watch it now, I'm just waiting for you to make this face.
Yep, it's what we're looking forward to.
For those of you that are listening to this later instead of watching it, you need to go to YouTube. You need to watch that promo and just watch Andy's face. It's classic.
Perfect.
Anyway, Andy, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go.
Yes, let's do it. Let's talk Sunday basketball. We got some incredible games. And again, we talked about the Saturday slate on Thursday's show, so check that out if you missed it. Giving you a good preview of like the Houston Gonzaga game and some of these that are really fun matchups. But it doesn't it stays great. Saturday's great. Slate's going to be awesome, but then Sunday we got some fantastic matchups as well. Want to kind of just talk through some of these games and some of our favorite matchups. I'm just going to give you a quick preview of each game, just the time where we're going to be able to watch these games. Then Isaac, I'm going to throw it to you. Talk about what are your favorite matchups here. We start the day on Sunday with UConn, Florida. I mean, this doesn't get much better than that. Starting a day with the two most recent champions to win back-to-back. UConn has won 13 consecutive NCAA tournament games. If they win this game, they will, I think, set the record for most consecutive games won in a tournament, in the tournament, I should say. This game will be at 12:10 Eastern time on Sunday morning on CBS. Gators favored by 9.5. Baylor versus Duke, another 9 versus 1, 2:40 on CBS. In the East region, FanDuel favoring Duke, like we said earlier, by 11.5.
Third most recent team to go back-to-back, actually.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And then we get, and I'll tease this right here. This is maybe my favorite game of the day. This is going to be a really fun one. Number 6 seed Illinois taking on number 3 Kentucky, 5:15 Eastern time on CBS. FanDuel favoring Illinois by 1.5. The only team that is a lower seed that is favored in these games on Sunday. Then we got 7 seed St. Mary's, 2 seed Alabama. Again, another chance for the WCC to get a win over the SEC. 6:10 on TNT. FanDuel favoring Bama by 5.5. 12 seed Colorado State, 4 seed Maryland, the Crab 5 versus Neat Clifford, 7:10 Eastern on TBS. FanDuel favoring those Terps by 6.5. 6 seed Ole Miss, 3 seed Iowa State, 7:45 on True TV. FanDuel favoring the Cyclones by 5.5. 10 seed New Mexico, 2 seed Michigan State, 8:40 TNT. FanDuel favoring the Spartans by 7.5. And then the Pac-12 championship game to close us out. 5 seed Oregon, 4 seed Arizona. Yes, it is a Big 10, Big 12 battle, but it just doesn't feel like that is what it should be. 9:40 TBS, FanDuel favoring Tommy Lloyd and the Wildcats by 4.5 in that one. Isaac, tons to get to. Where do you want to start?
First off, well played on the Pac-12 championship. I'm so proud of you. What a great joke. I'm with you, dude. There is so much that is fun in this game. In Sunday slate, excuse me. You said Illinois, Kentucky is your favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that game. Folks, just look, here's what I'm always cheering for. I'm cheering for my bracket to do well. So with apologies to Big Blue Nation, I've got Illinois in my Final Four, so I'm going to be cheering for them. They look good on Friday night, Andy. Just each game, there's great intrigue in it, right? We've got the St. Mary's defense against the Alabama offense. Coach Nate Oates he said post-game he was hoping to not need to put Grant Nelson in the game, but they were kind of struggling, Alabama was on Friday. And so Grant stood up and basically put himself in and had to go with that, but he looked good to me, Andy. And so they're going to need that. And thankfully Jaron Stevenson had come down awkwardly. And then he came back in the game too. I was like, Alabama's falling apart out here, but it looks like those guys should hopefully be good to go, and so we'll take that.
Stevenson injury looked rough. Like I was surprised how quickly he came back in. That looked terrible when it happened.
I know. I was like, that could legitimately be a broken wrist. The way he was like holding it like a little hook kind of looking situation. Look, I honestly, Andy, I'm like at first blush, I'm like, why Florida UConn to start the day? I gotta be honest. It should not be a good basketball game. I mean, like it should be a good, like high level basketball game. But I mean, it shouldn't be a good game in terms of score. Like Florida should dominate that game.
Yeah.
Same with Duke and Baylor. So I on first blush, those first two games, like, wow, I don't think they're close. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at it. I'm kind of with you. Like I could see them being close. I think to discount either Danny Hurley or Scott Drew feels a little bit foolish. But I also, like, if you were to tell me like, hey, Illinois, Kentucky, same area as Alabama, which are the two kind of middle games. If you told me that both those games were significantly closer than Florida, UConn, and Duke, Baylor in terms of like action at the end of the game, I would totally believe you. Like I think both those games, I think there's a possibility that Alabama runs away with St. Mary's. Like I could see that happening. St. Mary's, frankly, looked like they were going to get it ran out of the gym by Vanderbilt before they pulled it together in the second half and then came back and won, which was kind of the most impressive individual performance by a team that I think we saw on Friday. Was St. Mary's really, I mean, truly looked like they were just going to get absolutely hosed by the Commodores. But I think there's a pretty good chance they keep that game close. I think Illinois, Kentucky is going to be like a 5-point game from start to finish. Like I think that's going to just be an absolute barn burner. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that middle is going to be a little bit better in terms of like watching exciting games. And I think for hopefully Saturday will deliver some exciting games, but if it doesn't, and then Sunday's first two games are blowouts, people are going to start getting a little bit testy. So I think it'll be fun to see if these, and especially at the end of the day, I mean, I have a hard time believing that Oregon, Arizona is not going to be a little bit nasty and a little bit kind of a rock fight.
Oh, yeah.
And that should be fun. And I'm so excited to see what Neat Clifford can do against Derek Queen and Julian Reese and this just ridiculously fun starting lineup for the Terps.
Andy, when you said they almost got hosed by the Commodores, I know in my heart, I know you're talking about Vanderbilt, but immediately in my head, I pictured the 1970s band, the Commodores, and just the hilarity of like a band out here against, anyway, it's a whole thing. And here's one that I'm really interested in. Iowa State. Yeah. I have been so in on them this season, but with the injuries and how they kind of played down the stretch, I was like, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, they looked really good on Friday, dude. Like I was very impressed with how they played. Momcilovic had a game. Ole Miss was hot out of the gate on Friday. They cooled off. Carolina, we talked about that furious comeback. I think Iowa State should win that game, but if Ole Miss, I mean, they're rugged. It's a Chris Beard coach team. They play that no middles defense, right? And so that game could have some teeth, Andy, in it. And then I'm also interested to see how Richard Pitino has his team ready for Michigan State. I mean, you talked about him earlier. Donovan Dent is just an absolute dude.
Yeah.
And Nelly Jr. Joseph can control the inside. I think I saw a quote from Tom Izzo in his post game today. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know. But basically, like, I'm so sick and tired of that family, talking about the Pitino family, like good-naturedly, of course, right? But I was just like, man, I love it. And so, man, just as you said, so many good matchups. But those are going to have to wait because we got 8 more today. Now it's Mountain Time. Welcome to Saturday as well, by the way.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited about these. I'm trying to think of like my favorite individual like player versus player matchup, and I could probably think of 100 that I love out of this. Jumping out immediately, Donovan Dent versus Fears for Michigan State. I mean that or Jace. That one really stands out to me for that game. I'm excited about Jaden Bradley versus Jackson Shelstad in the final game. Like there's Walter Clayton versus Solo Ball. Like there's just so many fun elements to these games that I just absolutely cannot wait for.
Andy, great to be together. It is 2:00 for the East Coasters. We got to get these poor people to bed. And so, man, just want to say to all of you, thanks for being with us. We will do this again tomorrow night. Stick with us for that. Andy, I don't know if we'll go. What do you think we should do Sunday? Should we go live or do like a pre-recorded thing? I feel like it'd be fun to go live again.
Yeah, maybe we'll find something fun to do on Sunday. What do you think?
Because we're either, I'm not sure. We'll be back in Dallas for our studio work. And so we'll either record like from our hotel room or from the studio in Dallas. We'll have to wait and see on that. But I just love the energy of these lives, man. We got the chat going on. It's so fun. And so we'll see what happens with that. Folks, thank you so much for staying up late with us. All you, as you folks were talking about in the chat, all you college basketball degenerates. It's great to be together with all the junkies, man, unpacking day 2 of the NCAA tournament. Because let's be honest, Tuesday and Wednesday, they're like day -1 and day -2. They don't count as day 1 and day. Like, remember, Andy, when they were trying to I know I'm making us go long here, but when they tried to call that round 1.
Yeah, nope. Doesn't fly.
I'm glad we got rid of that. Anyway, folks, if you've not subscribed to the show on audio and video, make sure you do it right now. Subscribe there on YouTube. Just hit that button as you're watching this bad boy. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, I know we got Joyce in here in the chat. She's always very active on Discord, and so it's great to be together, and I see you other guys in there as well. That link is in the show notes. We'd love to see you in there hanging out and chatting with us too. We want to say, as always, apologies to the Lawyer family. We'll see that first game tomorrow. Apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Pope. Shouts to McBruins. And until we talk again tomorrow night, peace.